So grateful for our guest today. She's going to be sharing the story of her husband, actually, who was someone who went into communities where there was a lot of rejection. Maybe they didn't feel that acceptance. And really, his passion was that they would know that they are loved and accepted by God. So that we're going to be talking with Lesley Ann Richardson, author of Wildflower, a new book inspired by the iconic 70s song written by her late husband, Dave. Well, welcome, Lesley Ann. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Emily. I'm thrilled to be here.
So your book is actually based on the 70s global song Wildflower. It was a song performed by over 70 artists. And the songwriter is your late husband, Dave. What was the story behind the lyrics?
Okay, so Dave was a young policeman and he was living and working in his hometown of Victoria, British Columbia. And he also, as well as being a policeman, he loved writing songs. And he had a girlfriend at the time. She was a nurse at the Jubilee Hospital. And he called one night to take her out. And he saw she was very, very upset. And he found out that two of the ladies she'd been looking after had actually died that day while she was at work. And she was terribly upset. And so he listened and he comforted her. And then she said, "Thank you so much." And she disappeared to go and get ready for their evening out. Eventually, he thought, well, what is happening? So he knocked on the door of her bedroom, went in. She was fast asleep on the bed, still in her housecoat, with her hair wrapped in a towel after her shower, fast asleep. And he realized that she was very worn out after her traumatic day. So he put a blanket over her, careful not to waken her, and went home and took out his pen, and the lyrics started flowing. So he wrote the song in about 15 minutes, and the rest is really history because, as you said, it's still being played today. It's become a classic, more than 70 covers. And I would think that one reason for the success of the song and why it's touched so many hearts is the fact that it is so filled with compassion. And yeah.
Yeah, so why don't you tell us why you decided to write Dave's story now? You know, a lot of times you see the story written by the person themselves. So it's such a unique way that you've written about your late husband's story. Why now?
Okay. So I met Dave back in 2008 in Jerusalem, Israel. We were both there, both working for the church. And as we got to know one another, Dave would tell me his stories, and he was a great storyteller, and he had fascinating stories. He had stories from his police days. Some of them were very dramatic. He had stories from his songwriting days and his music friends. One of those friends was David Foster, who was the man who was really behind the production of Wildflower as a song and instrumental in it becoming a worldwide hit. And he also had stories of his time working with drug addicts. So I listened to his stories. And after we were married in Jerusalem, I started to write them down. So the years went by, and we eventually came back to Canada. And very sadly, Dave passed away in 2019. And then almost straight away, we were plunged into the lockdown situation. So I had this big sheaf of Dave's poems, handwritten poems, some of them from decades past, on scraps of paper. So I felt it was a good time to start to set them down on a Word document, which I did. And as I did so, I realized these would be really wonderful to weave into his story. So that's what I went ahead and did. And it came together, I think, really wonderfully. And
It
the
really
poems
did.
themselves.
The story and just hearing words directly from him were so impactful. And also just you put pictures throughout the book. I love that because it gave us a sense of really who Dave was as well. And he was both a poet and a policeman. But after
That's right.
Wildflower, he chose to fight crime instead of pursuing
Right.
music. And he
He
really
did.
dedicated his life, as you mentioned, to street ministry. So can you share a little bit
Yes.
more of that journey? Why did he choose to go in that direction?
Okay, so right from the very beginning, even when Dave was a little boy, he loved words and music, and he used to write down the lyrics that he'd hear on the radio. And he knew when he grew up, there were two things he wanted. He wanted to be a songwriter, and he wanted to be a policeman. He had a very, very strong sense of justice, and he really wanted to dedicate himself to fighting crime and injustice in the community and making it safe. So I always thought there were two sides to his character. He was a warrior and a fighter, but at the same time, he was very romantic and could write these beautiful songs. So I think that the both sides of his personality stayed with him throughout his life.
Mm.
But he did dedicate himself to the work of the force. And I think that as many policemen, law enforcement officials discover, it's a very tough world and they're confronted with some very horrific things along the way. And I think Dave got to a place where he himself had to struggle with drinking too much, addiction to prescription drugs. And he got through that because when he returned to his childhood faith, and really returned to God in a very deep and powerful way. And it was after that, and when he was semi retired, that he decided he would dedicate his life to helping the addicts that he saw on the streets of his city. And when he was with the police, he had worked with the drug uh, situation very extensively, and he was aware of the great toll that addiction takes on society. So he commenced his work, and he was a very charismatic person. And it was very easy for the young people on the streets to really feel safe with him, and he was able to give them hope. And there was another remarkable thing about this ministry that he went into. The Lord started giving him all kinds of words of wisdom and knowledge that were really remarkable. He himself didn't really understand what was happening, but it was a way God equipped him to help these young people. And it really had a very powerful impact on many, many lives.
Well, amazing. Thank
So
you so much for sharing Dave's story and just sharing the impact that he's had. If you want more information on Wildflower, you can go to our website at 700club.ca. Lesley Ann, thank you so much for joining us today.
thank you so much for having me.